Welcome to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast, where we help you in the LGBTQ plus community find a safe and affordable retirement place. Join Mark Goldstein as he interviews others who live in gay-friendly places around the globe. Learn about the climate, cost of living, healthcare, crime and safety, and more. Now, here's your host, Mark Goldstein.
Welcome to another episode of the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. Today we have Kevin Cavanaugh, and he's from a town called Alcala, La Real in Spain. And today we're going to learn everything about that town in Spain. First, I'll tell you a little bit about Kevin. Kevin was born and raised in a small town in upstate New York, around 40 miles outside Syracuse. Like many Americans, Kevin is the grandson of European immigrants. He attended college at the State University of New York in Geneseo, near Rochester. He received a bachelor's degree in sociology. During his junior year, Kevin applied to participate in one of the junior year abroad programs offered through the SUNY system. Kevin chose the junior year abroad program at the University of Seville, which is really where Kevin's love affair with Spain began. After returning to the U.S. to finish his degree, he very soon after graduation headed out west to San Francisco, where he started his career in human resources and worked for several years in San Francisco as well as nearby Silicon Valley, primarily for high-tech sector companies. When offered a very attractive role at the Microsoft based in Washington, D.C., Kevin moved back east and began a 10-year career with Microsoft and was offered future roles based in Puerto Rico, London, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. While based in Europe, Kevin has HR responsibility for 18 countries within the European Union, including Spain, which afforded him the opportunity to travel to countries he had only dreamed of when he was growing up as a little boy in rural upstate New York. I do know exactly where that place, Syracuse, is, upstate New York. But anyway, in 2018, while based in London, his 24-year relationship with his partner ended. So Kevin was suddenly faced with having to completely rethink his retirement plans and strategy. With daily direct flights from London to Granada, where Kevin has good friends, native Spaniards who live there, Kevin became more and more enamored with the area and he went for long weekend visits and eventually bought a home about 45 miles east of Granada in a small town of around 18,000 people called Alcala La Real, where he currently calls home. Kevin enjoys studying languages, foreign cinema, wine, cooking, gardening, and is passionate about learning history and historical architecture. With that, welcome, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. We have a lot to talk about. I'm so excited, and it's great to see you again.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here, and I'm really excited to talk to you
today. Thank
you.
So let's start off. Why did you choose Alcala La Real as a city in Spain? Tell us your story, how you chose that city.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned in my bio, I went to school in southern Spain in the region of Andalusia where Alcalá is. And so I really became quite familiar with the customs and the traditions and the history of this region. And I always thought one day I would return either as a tourist, or I never dreamt when I went to school here that I would eventually see myself retiring here, but I had always been enamored with this region of Spain, and found myself again as a person in their late 50s trying to figure out, okay, I've got to recalibrate all of my strategies and plans for retirement, and so where did I see myself being the happiest? And so that really was my focus in terms of this, looking at this area of the world in terms of where I wanted to spend my time. And long story short, I went investigating towns and small cities in and around the Granada province, and just really fell in love with this particular town, its history. I was looking for not a huge city, as you mentioned from my bio. Obviously, I've lived in many, many big cities of over 1 million people and really didn't see myself retiring in a large city. So I didn't want to be in a small dust bowl town where tumbleweeds were rolling down the street, but I wanted to be in a vibrant town that was relatively close if I wanted to be near a metropolitan area, but I didn't want to actually live in a big city. So that was sort of what led me to look at this particular town. I looked at 7 or 8 towns in the province of Granada. So it really was the place that I just felt most at home in.
What do you think?
Really, I really literally just saw a couple of places with a real estate agent, and I went to the local sort of plaza, the main square, had a cup of coffee, and sat there and just really felt like, yeah, this is the
is it.
place. I mean, really, spiritually speaking, or whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
that was your aha
Yeah,
moment. It was like, this is the
yeah,
place that I want to be.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So tell us,
yeah.
geographically speaking, where is Alcala La Real located within Spain? And does it have like a center city? Does it have all of the amenities that any other small town would have?
Yeah, if you look at a map of the country of Spain, the region that I'm in is Andalusia, which is the southernmost region of Spain. And so the province of Jaén is the province within Andalusia where Alcalá is La Real is located. Andalusia has two coastlines. So the coast on the east side is the Mediterranean, and the coast on the west side is the Atlantic. So I'm sort of in between both coasts. I can get to the Mediterranean in about an hour and a half. If I want to go to the Atlantic side, a little bit longer, maybe about 2 hours. Again, I'm closest to Granada in terms of the largest city, but I'm actually in a province that's called Jaén, which is right on the border with Alcalá. So I'm just inside a different province, although Granada is the closest big city.
How far away is it from Portugal? Just so I get my bearings.
It's two
2 hours.
hours to the border. Yeah,
Okay.
2 hours to the border.
Not too
Yeah,
far.
and that can be by car or train. There's some new high-speed rail lines that have opened. I went to Portugal in early June for a couple of weeks, and I took the train, and it was 2 hours
That's
from
pretty
here,
good.
from Granada to the Algarve. I went to the southern part of
Oh,
Portugal.
very good. So is living in an LGBTQ plus community important to you? And if so, did you choose to live in, or is there such thing as an LGBTQ community, or is it just like let live community type?
Yeah, I mean, I lived in San Francisco during the late 80s and the 90s, and I experienced what it was like to be completely open and out at work. And socially speaking, it was a real free environment. And so I've never been in the closet, so to speak, since I left college. And so I really appreciate the LGBT community that I was able to tap into in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And throughout the years living in other countries, mainly European countries, it's 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 important to me, but it's not the most important thing
Hmm.
anymore. What's important to me, Mark, is to live in a country that has the kinds of legal protections that we all want as LGBT members.
Yes.
So, having lived in Sweden and Denmark, in the UK, and now in Spain, I've never lived in a country that didn't have gay marriage.
Okay.
And I consider gay marriage sort of the acid
Yes.
test of a government. If you're going to allow people to marry, then okay, you're you're pretty
All
progressive.
right.
So for most of my time living outside the United States, I've never lived in a country where I didn't have equal rights for
Do
the
you know
most
if
part.
those rights for LGBT, do you know if that's written in their constitution? Because in the U.S. now, there's word that there might be the Supreme Court might go back on their ruling for same-sex marriage, and that really is upsetting to a lot of people. So
Ye-
could
Yes, I have heard that.
can they do
Yes.
that
Uh,
in Spain, or is the laws of equality written in their constitution, or do you know?
it's a great question, Mark. I don't know if it's in the Constitution or not, but I do know that gay rights, or excuse me, gay marriage was legalized many years here before it was in the
Yeah,
United States. And the same with Denmark and Sweden and for the most part the UK. So these are countries that were far, far ahead of the US in terms of that kind of progressive legislature. But it's a good question. I'll find out. I'll ask a local that works here in the town hall. They should
yeah,
probably know. It's a good
yeah.
question.
Thank you.
Yeah. I don't hear any conversation about it being possibly taken
No
away.
one would kind of think
Um,
about it either, probably.
no,
There,
no, it's no,
like
no.
here,
It's
now it's
it's
something to think about
it's
here.
just well, I do speak the language and I do know locals and I am very in tune to the politics of Spain. I'm very aware of what's happening politically. And I all I can say is I don't think it would even cross anyone's mind to even
Right.
think
Yeah.
about taking away a civil
Yeah.
right. I just can't imagine it.
That's why I'm thinking, because I'm here and you're there. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
okay. How about the neighborhood? So they don't really have an LGBTQ community because everyone is live and let live, basically. And so are there any bars that you can go to that are exclusively LGBTQ, or do you have to go into Granada for that?
Yeah, you'd have to go to Granada for that. I mean, it's even in Granada, although it's a very large city in terms of population. It's three-quarters of a million people, I think. So there are, I believe, maybe two or three gay bars there. But I went to a bar in Granada with some straight friends of mine who live here in Alcala, and for, believe it or not, St. Patrick's Day, being half Irish, and these friends of mine, one of them is half Irish as well. So anyway, we went to Granada to celebrate St. Patrick's Day at a bar. It was very much a heterosexual bar, but there were men kissing each other in that bar, but it wasn't a gay bar. So it's a difficult one to explain, Mark. I think there's a lot of
I think it's integrated.
there's a lot of lit and yeah, it's just very integrated. Like I don't know anyone that goes specifically to a gay bar and they are gay, but I just think it's a very live and let live society in
Right.
general.
And it seems like nobody
Yeah.
cares. Whereas here they judge, and people have I mean, there are gay bars here because there might be a need, because
Hmm.
gay people want to be
Hmm.
around gay people and not be discriminated against. So that might be
Yes.
that might be the
Yeah.
factor. Okay.
I've been asking myself recently, why is it so different here, really socially, around the topic? And I think you hit the nail on the head, Mark. People just don't
Right.
care. They really don't care about what
It's
you
not an issue.
do in your bedroom. It's none of their
Right.
business. And it's not an issue. And more than that, there's no judgment around it, whether you do or you
Right.
don't. I mean, I have plenty of heterosexual
Yeah.
friends here. They all know I'm gay,
It
but
doesn't
it's
matter. It's
just
like, yeah,
doesn't
right. It's
matter.
like
It just doesn't
we
matter.
have heterosexual friends down the hall from us where we live, and they're great people. And we
Hmm.
get along. We just went to their home. They have another home in Arizona, and we spent an overnight with them. I mean, it was a great time. So
Hmm.
if that's the way it is in Spain, I'm all for it. How easy or how difficult is it for you to make friends now? I know you have an upper hand on this because you know the language very well inside and out. But
Right.
When you got there, when you first moved from the US, was it difficult in making friends, or was it pretty easy because you knew the language?
It it really requires you to go and be very proactive. Even though I speak the language, I you really just have to be proactive about it. And when I first started living in the house full time, because originally it was basically a vacation home for when I wanted to pop down from London where I was working at the time. But since I've been living here really on a full time basis, it's very easy to sit back in my garden and my with my wonderful view and sip the best red wine.
Hmm.
But it's not gonna I'm not gonna make friends that way. So I have you have to make an effort. I live in a relatively small town, so most people know my face and they're very, very friendly people, and people just talk to me. And I carry on conversations, and then eventually that led to making some very, very nice and close friends. But I did need to make that effort, and I would say that that's my biggest advice to anyone who lives in a small town or a large city, really, anywhere in Spain. It's they're very friendly people overall, and they're very open to meeting people from other parts of the world. I've never sensed any sort of anti-American or sentiment that's anti whatever immigrant or expat, whatever you call me. Quite the opposite. They're very curious. They want to know, like why did you choose Alcala? Why are you living in Alcala? Right. And I know because I'm registered in the town hall on the census. They told me when I registered, "Oh, congratulations, you're our first American." Yeah. So I'm literally the only American that lives in the town.
Wow.
The only other English speakers that I've encountered are British expats.
Okay.
That have bought property.
So
here.
For me and my husband, in your town, it would be a little bit difficult to integrate because we don't know any Spanish, or we're just learning. We're making the effort to learn, but I would assume it would be a little bit more difficult as if we were to locate in Malaga or Alicante or Valencia.
Yeah. It would be more difficult. It would not be at all impossible, but it would be more difficult because I can count on one hand how many people that are native Spaniards that live here can actually speak English. And that's really deliberate on my part, Mark. So I don't want to import my American whatever to Spain. I want to live in an authentically Spanish town where I'm really forced, in a way, to speak every day. My Spanish is at a level of fluency that I never dreamed I could attain. And I'm very proud of that. It's probably one of the biggest accomplishments that I'm most proud of in my entire life, is learning another language. It's just such an incredible gift to be able to communicate in a different language. So for me, it's deliberate.
Yeah. Because you immersed yourself, like living in a town that you live in, you immersed yourself. You really have no choice. If that's the place you want to be, you're going to get the education and you're going to learn Spanish quicker than somebody that's an expat that's living amongst expats in a larger city.
Absolutely. If you were, to your question earlier, to move to a town this size anywhere in Spain where you were forced to really speak the language, I guarantee you would be fluent in probably within a year, because you just don't have a choice, really. And I also like languages, so I'll be honest, that factors into it as well. Not everybody likes learning a language. I mean, I don't like math and science, but I love languages. So it's just something that I gravitate to just because of my interest.
I think the people of my age or older people say, "Oh, it's kind of a crutch," in my opinion. They say, "Oh, I'm so old, I can't learn." I don't know. It may be true that
Mm,
it's more difficult because people don't remember when they're a little bit older. But I think at the same time, I
yeah,
think if you put something to it, you'll learn. My husband's actually doing much better than I
yeah.
am because he's retired. I'm not retired, and he's actively he contacts this tutor from Spain every week, and
Hmm.
he does a lesson or two every week for an hour. So he's doing better
Hmm.
than I am because of his time that he has. But yeah, I
Yeah, I think when you do enter sort of full-time retirement, you'll find yourself with obviously a lot more time. And that's really key, I think, in terms of really buckling down and really, really being determined to learn a language is just having that time, the luxury
yep.
of time.
So tell us, what is the local economy like? Can you provide examples to our audience of your housing costs? So you said you
Hmm.
purchased a home, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Can you give us an idea of the purchasing price in your town and what electric and water bills and gas bills are like and taxes? I know everybody's
Hmm.
different and their
Sure.
consumption is different, but just as a general.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a macro level, given that some of the audience may be considering other areas of Spain, from a macro level, if you look at the regions of Spain, Andalusia is the most economical region in the country. The opposite extreme would be Catalonia, where Barcelona is being the most expensive. So there's in between, you've got areas like Valencia that are really, really affordable
Hmm.
as well. So from a personal standpoint, I pay about 10 euros a month for water. And when I say euros, we can just say it's the same as
Dollars.
dollars because I just
Right.
looked. Yeah, I just looked this morning and it's almost on parity with the dollar
Yeah.
right now. So 10 euros for water. My last electricity bill was 32. I looked it up before we started so I could be accurate. 32 was my last electricity bill. Taxes, I pay 85 euros a
Oh
year in property
God.
tax.
it's it's like
I
unheard
know.
of.
I know. My cell phone or my mobile, they say mobile
Hmm.
phone. My mobile phone is 15 a month and my internet is 22, I think.
Wow.
And that's a basic package. I don't have the super, super deluxe package, but I get super, super good, high quality fiber optic internet in my house.
And they have fiber
Um,
all the way to your town. And I can't,
yeah,
I'm in
yeah.
Phoenix, Arizona, the fifth largest city in the country, and I can't get
Mm,
fiber.
yeah. I didn't even know it was available until I went to pay my bill ahead of time because I was going to be away. And they're like, well, we can change you to fiber if you want. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Was it more expensive? They said, no, it's the same amount.
Wow.
So they came in the next day, literally, and they installed fiber optic. Spain is very, very technologically, as you might know, very, very with the
Yep.
21st century, without a
Yep.
doubt. So what I did is I added up all this monthly costs, and I literally pay about 95 euros a month for everything.
Oh my God. That's what I
Everything.
have to say. Oh my
What
God.
water? I know water, electricity, phone, internet. That's
That's
it.
it. To me,
Everything.
that's amazing
Yeah,
because
yeah.
our internet alone, just internet, is 110. And then
Hmm.
we add our electric bills in the summer. Now, do you have air conditioning?
I don't, but I might get it next year only because, like the rest of the world, it's just unusually
Yeah.
hot this year, and I very much am a believer in global warming, and I don't think it's going to get any
Yeah.
better next year. So I'm probably going to install it next year, but I don't have it now. All I just use is a fan, and it's been fine. The one thing that's important to note about Alcala La Real specifically is I'm over 1,000 feet above sea level.
Okay.
So even though I can be in Granada in like a half an hour, it's dramatically
Cooler.
cooler here.
So is it
Cooler
drier too?
because of the altitude. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
dry. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's like zero humidity.
oh wow,
Yeah.
it's like Phoenix. It's
Yeah.
Phoenix, we get like in the summer, it's
Yeah.
humid because we get the monsoons coming in, which we just have, but we need the rain.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
give you an example, my expenses for my electricity is around $280 per month in the
Wow.
summer. It goes
Wow.
down in the winter. We don't use it. Pretty much it's off most of the time. So we go down to about $70 without air
Yeah.
conditioning. But yeah,
Yeah.
you got a pretty good deal for $90 for everything.
Yeah. And the way this is an older home, again, I wanted to feel like I was living in Spain. It's an older home. I definitely did some renovations to make it a little bit more the way I like to
Hmm.
live. But it's an older home, so it's built in the way of the traditional Andalusian homes are built. So the walls are incredibly thick. They're stone, so it keeps it cool in the summer and it stays warm in the
Yeah.
winter. The people, historically speaking, traditionally, they knew how to build the homes to protect from the heat as well as the cold.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely understand that. Does Alcala La Real, does it have a art scene? Where do you go to get your little arts and culture fix?
Yeah, we have a theater, so an auditorium in town that's quite large. It's 3 levels, so it's 3 tiers, and they have performances there every weekend, and it's usually music kinds of performances, either symphonies or small trios or orchestral trios. They have a local choir here that does choral performances. They I think it's every third weekend they'll show a movie. So although we don't have a cinema per se, I know that there's always movies that they will be having every third weekend. And we attract some pretty top performers that are either Spaniards or from the Spanish speaking world. So a couple of months ago I saw a Cuban pianist who apparently is incredibly well known. I've never heard of him before. I was talking to a friend of mine in Puerto Rico who said, "You saw him in person?" So I'm like, "Yeah, is he really well known?" They're like, "He's like the most incredible jazz pianist in Latin
World.
America and blah blah blah." Yeah, so we do have that in terms of music, and we have dance as well. There was a flamenco show not too long ago from Madrid that performed there. There's the other night I went to an art opening at a local, it's not an art exhibit hall, but it is an old convent that they've renovated and made into like an art exhibit hall where there will be temporary exhibits. And there was an opening that I went to by a Dutch artist who's got an exhibit throughout the month of August there. So there's some of that. There's in Granada, you can just see almost anything you
Hmm.
want. You'll have top-notch performers from Europe there, or sometimes even I think Elton John was there one year. So you can get that
From
from
Granada, and it's only
in,
45
in, in
minutes away.
Granada. Yeah, I feel very connected to Granada, although there's absolutely nothing in between
Hmm.
my town and Granada except for olive groves. I mean, it's just nothing,
Wow.
right? Nothing. Although I feel like I am almost like a suburb
Hmm.
of Granada. Physically, I'm very, 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 very separate.
How often
Yeah,
how often do you travel to Malaga?
relatively often. I really like Malaga. I really like Malaga a lot. In June, they just introduced a high speed train from Granada to Malaga, which they didn't have before. And that makes it incredibly easy to go
Oh
there.
wow.
It's 55 minutes. It's 55 minutes from Granada now to Malaga,
Wow, that's great.
which before, even by car, it was about 2 hours.
Wow,
So yeah, the whole infrastructure, I have to just really
that's
emphasize the
great.
whole infrastructure in Spain, all over Spain, is like no other country I've ever seen. And I'm sure it's ranked in the top 5 worldwide with countries like Japan and whatnot. Because the ability to get around by public transportation is second to none here. I actually had a car for a while and I sold it because I just never used it.
Oh, that's
I
a
just
great
never
point,
used
though.
it.
So even in your town,
Yes,
it's
even in
everything
my
is
town.
walkable.
I had about 10 criteria marked before I decided to buy this place and where I decided to buy this place. Yeah, I had my moment with my coffee in the pub in the central square thinking spiritually, oh, this is where I want to be. I also had the very practical list of the 10
Right, the
non-negotiables.
spreadsheet.
So the number one thing for me was climate. I've lived in the tropics. I lived in the Caribbean. I've lived in upstate New York, which can be one extreme or the other. It's either 10 feet of snow or just
Rain.
uncomfortable humidity, rain, gray day after gray day. The Mediterranean climate was something that I knew that I would be happy in from a climate perspective. And not so much even the warmth of the climate, but the light. The light is so important to you and your mood, I believe. At least it is to me.
This is why my husband
So,
actually moved from Watertown, New York, which is an hour north of Syracuse, because
yes, I know it
yeah,
well.
because every day he would say all the time, "It's so gray. It's so gray. I got to get out of
Yeah.
here because it gets depressing."
Yeah, it does. It does. And especially when you know that there are other climates. I mean, you have other choices, at least those of us that have been lucky enough to have choice,
Yep.
right? So, number 2, walkability. To your point, it had to be a place that was walkable. Although I have had my driver's license since I was 16 years old, I didn't want to spend my third act, shall we say, in which I refer to retirement years as the third act. I didn't want to spend it being a slave to a car.
Gotcha.
So public transportation is kind of connected to that. And so there's 5 or 6 buses every day that go to Granada. I've gone to Granada just to go shopping and then back the same day. So it's not an issue here. Hospital. I wanted to make sure that there was a hospital, which there is. And it's a very nice, modern hospital. It was only, I think, built about 8 or 9 years ago. So it's a relatively new hospital. It has operating facilities. So it's a full-fledged hospital. And a lot of people just assume because you're retired, it's about, oh, what if I get sick? But it's also important to have a hospital if you have an accident.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've been renovating this property. It's one of those things that never ends. You're always doing something. I've been up on ladders. I've been nailing things. You never know. So it's really nice to have it if you have an accident.
Absolutely.
And there's also 2 health clinics in town. There's the North Clinic and the South Clinic. And I live 2 blocks from the North Clinic. So that's where I get things like, well, that's where I got my COVID shot. That's where I got my prescription for a medication that I take for hypertension. I have my private care physician there, and he's very familiar with my biography and physiology. So I can walk 2 blocks.
This is all walking.
Get all that basic stuff. It's all walking. There are a total of 6 pharmacies in town. Wow. The one I go to is 2 blocks from my house.
You have groceries, I'm sure, right there, walkable.
Yeah. Most of the grocery stores are small. I mean, that they'll have everything, but they're smaller. There is one large supermarket called Mercadona, and it's a chain. It's all throughout Spain. So they have them in Alicante, they have them in Valencia, and all over. So there's that sort of big supermarket that I also can walk to if I want. But I like going. I like going to the small the fruit stand and the cheese shop. When I talk to ladies at the vegetable store, I just prefer that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And
it's a
then
lot
things are
healthier
usually
food
fresher.
too.
Yeah, It's fresher and it's healthier. And it's socially, I think it's a great way to just sort of feel connected to the town. Another big thing for me was personal safety. So I was very clear to myself, and I'm very vocal about it to my American friends who I talk to in the United States. I do not want to live in a country where people carry guns. Full stop.
You and me both.
I do not want to live in a country where people can carry guns. Period.
You and me both.
I don't care what your political view is on it. I don't care. I don't want to feel unsafe. So that's kind of a given that you don't have that issue here. Accessibility to an international airport is also something that was important to me. So I'm on the side of the Granada airport. So airports, like everywhere else in the world, are outside of the city center. Obviously, they have to be. The Granada area is east of Granada, which means it's going towards where I live.
Okay.
So it's
closer.
It's closer than Granada for me to actually go to the airport.
Okay.
And there are direct flights to London, to Paris, to Italy.
That's great.
You can fly to Barcelona if you don't want to take the train, etc. So airport, oh, by the way, the airport is called the Federico Garcia Lorca Airport. Garcia Lorca was a historical figure, a playwright, very, very, very famous throughout Spain, but he was born in a town not too far from where I live. And he was an openly gay playwright in the 1930s. And he was assassinated by the Franco Nationalist Party. And so he became quite a sort of an art figure and idol. Legend. And so anyway, they've named the Granada airport after him. And everybody's very well aware he was an openly gay figure and playwright as well as a poet. And I think he was a theater director as well. And I think that's a statement on the progressive thinking of this country to name an airport after something like that. So a little sidebar there.
Oh, going back to transportation. One thing I was kind of curious about, which I discovered, I don't think there's a direct train going from the Alicante region to the Malaga area. You have to go through Madrid. Is there?
That's true. That's true.
Any plans?
Yeah,
do you
that's
know
true.
In the future for going straight down?
It's so funny because I thought about you, Mark, because you mentioned Alicante to me before. There is a plan.
There is.
Yes. There is a plan. They are working on it. I don't know if they're actually laying the tracks for it yet, but it is in the plan for the future. And it's something that people have wanted. So so there will be eventually Alicante to Malaga. It will probably go through Almeria, which is another coastal town. Well, it's not a town, it's a city. It's a very well-known city in Andalusia, but it doesn't get talked about as much as Malaga does in terms of a coastal port city. But Almeria is probably where it will make a stop on the way. Almeria is on the Mediterranean as well.
Yeah.
So they do have.
I don't even live there, and I was wondering about that because I'm also wondering like Barcelona to Malaga.
Oh yeah, Malaga to Barcelona is very easy because it's, for example, Malaga has direct high-speed rail from Malaga station in the city center to Gotha. So it literally bypasses Madrid. And this is a new sort of update to the system. So before you used to have to stop in Madrid and then go on to Barcelona. So now you can go straight from Malaga to Zaragoza. I've done it.
Oh, wow.
I've done it because I have a friend who lives in Zaragoza. And then you're an hour from Barcelona. And so I think you probably have to change trains. But there's probably a direct one as well, but you would stop in Zaragoza for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to Italy tomorrow, and I'm going on the train.
Wow, that's great.
I have no desire to go to an airport anymore. I just don't. Plus, the thing, again, that I mentioned earlier that you really realize at this stage of your life, you have time.
Right.
I have no rush.
What's the rush?
There's no reason. Yeah. When I was a human resources executive, I was flying all over the place and I was running to the airport, like trying to catch my plane on time. And those days, I don't miss
Those are
them.
over.
And
What's a
yeah.
what's a
Plus,
round trip
plus the
ticket
train you
or a one way ticket
to
to Italy
to
from here from you?
by train is probably more expensive. I'm doing is I'm going to Cordoba, but I'm equidistant between Cordoba and Granada, so it's a little over 45 minutes to get to Cordoba
Okay.
from Alcala, and there's 4 or 5 buses a day to Cordoba as well, which is a beautiful, beautiful city, very important city historically. So I'm going to Cordoba, where I pick the high-speed train to Barcelona direct, and that is €75, I think.
And then how do you get to Italy?
So Italy, from Barcelona, I go to Marseille, France.
France.
Yeah. And I'm just going to stop there because I want to just spend the night. And I love that part of France. I'm going to spend a couple of days on the coast in Cassis, which is on the Mediterranean. And then I'm going to go continue on to Sanremo, Italy, which is where I've rented an apartment.
Wow.
And Sanremo is great because it's it's about 20 minutes from the French border. So you literally can wake up, have your breakfast in Italy, and have lunch in
Wow.
France. And that's what I'm going to
Put
do.
me in your suitcase. That sounds
It's
great.
a little there's a little bit of personal desire for me to practice speaking those languages because I studied both, and I want to be able to actually use them in a real-time situation. And I'm taking a cooking class while I'm in Italy, and a friend's going to fly over from San Francisco for a few days to spend with me while she's hopping over from Lisbon, which is where she was going to go initially until she heard I was going to be in Italy, and so she's taking a little side trip. So anyway,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about the visa requirements.
Yeah. So for your audience, I would encourage them to listen to the podcast about Valencia and Alicante because I think the two folks that did those podcasts were really, really great at explaining the visa process. I'll just reiterate what they said. So there's typically two kind of traditional visas that you probably gravitate to. The first one is the golden visa, which requires you to buy property. And I keep reading different articles about what the value of that property needs to be. I've heard
I think it's
500,000.
500.
Is it? Okay. So I've heard that and I've heard 250, but it's probably 500. So there's that. So you would get a visa automatically if you buy a property that's valued that or above.
Right.
And by automatically, I don't mean like day one. You have to apply and you have to go through a process. And the other one is the non-lucrative visa. So basically, you go to your embassy or your consulate in the United States closest to where you live. You go to the Spanish consulate, that is, or the Spanish embassy, and then you fill out forms and you basically submit paperwork that proves that you have income that will allow you to be able to live in Spain without using the the, the state.
Right. The resources of the
In other
Spanish
words,
economy.
of the yeah, exactly. You're not a drain on the local
Right.
economy, I guess, is my point. There's two other types of visas that weren't mentioned in those podcasts that apply to me because there's two other visas called one is called arraigo and the other one is arraigo laboral. And arraigo is a word in Spanish that basically means to take root. And arraigo social means you've taken root socially. Arraigo laboral means you've taken root with work or you have some sort of a tie to a work-related activity. So I went for the arraigo social because I have qualified for the criteria that determines if I have socially integrated. So you go through an interview process at the town hall and it's in Spanish, so you have to prove that you're
Fluent
pretty
in Spanish.
fluent. Yeah. And also, I am personal friends with the director of the local grammar school here in town. He's invited me to do presentations with some of the classes on American history and American culture and
Wow.
things like that. So we've become really good friends. He's a really wonderful guy. He's a straight man who's married to this wonderful woman. We've all become friends. He has 2 kids. Anyway, so everyone knows who he is, and so he's a good friend of mine. And so that's just something I was able to prove, that I know people locally. I'm an upstanding citizen, basically resident,
Right.
and I don't have. So it's a different kind of process that you're not going to have a lot of people using, because I think most people are not in my situation,
Right.
but they do exist.
Right.
They do exist. There are 2 other types that do
Well,
exist.
you are special. And in a good way.
Thanks. So yeah, so there are multiple types of visas, but the ones that the classic American expat would look at is either the golden visa or the non-lucrative visa.
And either one of them, both of them require you to purchase medical insurance, private medical insurance, at least for the first year.
Yeah, just the first year.
That you're
just the first
that
year.
you're a resident,
Mm-hmm.
and then after the first year, you can qualify for the socialized medicine, the socialized insurance, which I believe there's a slight cost on as well, because what I believe is because you haven't worked in that country all the years and haven't given money to their Social Security type
Mm-hmm.
program. So I think it's something like $60 maybe a month for the socialized.
Well, I don't pay anything, so I don't
Oh,
know
really?
where you've heard that. I don't know where you've heard that from, but yeah, and I don't know any Spaniard who does.
So it's
I
totally
don't know.
free even for immigrants.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. If you're a resident,
right.
yeah. If you're a resident, yeah.
Okay.
There's also some other stipulations with respect to refugees.
Okay.
Like, there's been some recent refugees that we've taken in from North Africa for political reasons, and so they're sort of granted the health service just for their unique situation.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think your other guests have mentioned, that I'll just mention again around the non-lucrative visa, which is, I think, most of your audience will be considering, is it doesn't allow you to work.
Right.
So I wouldn't want that, because I tutor people here locally just to keep my kind of brain functioning, and also it's a good social integration exercise as well, because I teach English to Spaniards, but I also teach Spanish to British expats.
Wow.
So I teach both languages and I tutor, and so someone heard about me and offered me a job at a local training center that I've been doing very part-time, but I don't really want to work full-time at all. So they offered me a situation that was full-time, and I said, I really just want a few hours a week. I just don't want to work. I just don't want to work anymore.
I don't blame you.
But I do want to keep active. I want to keep, and it's a training center I can walk to. And they do all kinds of training. They do health and safety training. They do training for marketing professionals. All the people I teach are adults. Mm-hmm. So many of them are in their 40s and 50s. And so they're working for companies locally that require them to know a certain level of English for their job. So they've got an incentive to learn. And so they're very, very good students. And, I've socialized with some of them, and it's been a great experience. And I think, Mark, I'll be a little philosophical here, but I think it's naturally kind of universally human for someone that's an immigrant or an expat to ask themselves, what does this place give me? And I like to ask the question, what can I give to the place? Right. And I really feel like I'm special.
You are.
And I do no, and I do. I mean, I'm half joking, but I'm not. I mean, I do think I can give the local community something, and I was recently interviewed on the local radio station because people started to encourage me to do what they call language interchange. They call it intercambio in Spanish, where you bring people that are native Spaniards as well as expats, like some of the people I tutor in that are British expats, together, and we share half the hour in Spanish and half the hour in English, and so we both practice. And so I led a group for a while of the intercambio, and that's when the radio station heard about me, and so they wanted to interview me, and so the rest is kind of
Well,
history.
they're lucky. They're lucky they interviewed you. And so am I. So, yeah, I mean, when I retire, I want to retire from the corporate America, but it would be
Yeah,
nice if I could continue doing podcasts, and I don't get paid for it per se. I mean, people might donate some money for my hard work,
yeah.
but I would like to continue that also. It's a good brain thing. Keep busy, and there's a lot to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in a very small town, and there's plenty going on, and there's plenty I can get involved with, either volunteer wise or otherwise. And I do have the language, so that's a huge leg up, I guess. But even if I didn't, I don't feel like it's impossible either. What's important is making the effort to try to learn it, I think.
Right. Which we will be doing before we even visit.
That's great.
Yeah. We figured,
That's really great.
yeah, we don't want to go to another country, even though you can, because you can say that you're a tourist and you're going all to these touristy places, but we don't. We want to be able to try to communicate, even if they say, "Oh, just we're going to talk in English,"
Yeah.
because they do that
Yeah.
often.
Yeah.
If they see that somebody's struggling, I guess. But we want to make the effort. We're in a different country. We feel like we're in their country. Let's try to give back something and learn something. People in the United States
Yeah.
are not like some people in the United States, if they come across an immigrant that doesn't speak English, they take it different ways. They take it personally, and they're not as nice as
Yeah.
people from other countries. Like, if I've heard Spain and Portugal, if you go there and you make an effort, they love that. They love you trying to make the effort. Whereas
Absolutely.
here in the United States, they're very judgmental to me. It's like, if somebody speaks Spanish, they judge them for, like, why don't you
Yeah.
speak English? And
Yeah.
that shouldn't be.
Yeah. I've never, again, I know the language and I understand the language. When I'm in a restaurant, if I'm in a crowded restaurant, I can understand what everybody's saying. And I've never, ever, ever, ever encountered any comments from anybody that is a local Spaniard that indicates that at all that they resent people that don't speak fluent
Right.
Spanish. They're just not that it's just not that kind of a culture. They just don't do that. Yeah. So again, the language thing is a huge leg up. But a lot of my American friends will say, "Oh God, it's such a challenge," and I would prefer to use the word adventure, because it's why resist? I mean, embracing other culture, embracing other language. I mean, that's what makes life interesting.
It's kind of cute. So my husband, I'm going to give him kudos for this. So one day, last week, I walk out. I'm in my office, and I walk out to the kitchen, and I see all of these sticky notes all over every appliance. And he had written in Spanish all of these phrases pertaining to the appliance, or do you want coffee or tea, or do you want wine, or
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
thought it
yeah.
was just so cute. And we
That
left them
is.
up there. It's like on the refrigerator. Do you want blueberries or strawberries? And every time I look at the refrigerator, I look at the sticky and I look at the words and I'm like, okay, so that means blueberries and that means strawberries.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Great.
it's just something that we're doing.
Yeah.
We're trying, put it bluntly,
That's
we're
great.
just trying to do something to help us understand, because it isn't easy, but whatever tools we have or we heard of, it's really doing well. So just wanted to share that with
Well,
you.
I mean, not to, yeah, I mean, I think that's really cute. That is really cute. I think that a lot of what I spend my time doing with these 4 students of mine that I teach Spanish to, the British expats that live here, I spend a lot of my time actually coaching them on things like that. Like put stickers on appliances, watch Netflix in
That's what I'm
Spanish,
doing.
not in
I'm
English.
watching
Yeah,
Valeria.
good,
it's,
good,
it's,
good, 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 good,
and it's kind
good,
of cool, and it's all in Spanish and it has English subtitles.
good. Perfect. That's perfect. Because you're probably not aware of it, but you're getting your ear used
Right.
to
My
it.
brain will maybe absorb some
Yes.
words and I'm like,
Yes.
oh, I know that word. I know that word.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Subliminally, you're learning it and you don't
Right.
realize. And that's great. I mean, you're doing all the right
Even
stuff,
YouTubes.
Mark. I mean,
It's like we have these YouTubes. We're in
well,
the shower and I put on these YouTubes that teach you Spanish, and they kind of come up on the
mhm.
YouTube in writing, and then the guy repeats it 5 times. So I'm like listening to that, even though I rewind it all the time and listen to the same thing all the time. Maybe it'll sink in.
Right.
But anyway,
No, it's a good habit to do, especially with expectations that you're actually going to be living in a Spanish speaking country.
right.
I had a lot of great teachers growing up and going through school and in university. And my Spanish teacher very much was someone who inspired me to go take that junior year in Seville. And she had a plaque in her office that said, the knowledge of the world is not contained in only one language.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came back from living in Seville and learning Spanish, I went back to see her and I said, now I know what that means.
Yep. Yeah.
Because it's not just learning vocabulary and how to structure a sentence. It's learning how a different culture thinks.
Right.
And I don't know how else to articulate it other than saying it just is so much more than learning a bunch of words.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up, is there anything you miss from the States that you don't have?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I'm just going to repeat what your other guest said.
Mexican
food. Mexican food. I lived in California, so I got really spoiled. Living in San Francisco, like the foodie heaven, it's just foodie heaven. So I miss Indian food, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what I've done, going to my point about what can I give back versus what do I not have or what do I have, is I've done over the last year, once the pandemic kind of freed up everyone from finally socializing again, is I started to have theme dinners at home. And I did a Mexican night. I did a Hindu night where I made chicken tandoori. And it's funny, it's getting kind of a popular thing with my friends. And they're like, oh, when you come back to Italy, are you going to do an Italian night?
I love it.
So, I mean, really, Mark, you probably are used to really amazing Mexican food living in Phoenix. But I mean, really, how hard is it for you to make a burrito? Or how hard is it to make fajitas?
Right.
I mean, if you can't get it, then make it. All right. That's my
Great attitude. Great attitude. I'm coming over
have,
for dinner.
And you have in the large supermarket that I mentioned that's in town, you do have the ingredients.
Right. You just have to make it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to find a Mexican restaurant in Spain that I like. I know that. I've traveled all over looking.
Seems like many people have done the same.
Yeah. So anyway, I miss the food. And Chinese, yes. Although there's a few decent ones. I'm not going to say great, because that's a word you would. I used to go to Chinatown in San Francisco for my
Yeah.
Chinese.
And me in New York City.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, New York as well. Of course, there's some decent ones, but you have to really look, and you have to really sort of get recommended word of mouth kind of things, because you can get some really awful stuff. But other than that, I really don't miss. I don't really
Miss anything.
miss anything.
Gotcha.
I don't.
So,
I don't.
so Kevin, in wrapping up, what would you say to our
Mm-hmm.
audience if they're thinking to relocating in your region? I'm not saying just in your town, because maybe it's not something for everyone, but in your
Mm-hmm.
region, the Granada area, even anywhere in
Yeah.
Andalusia.
Yeah. I mean, I've been lucky in my lifetime mostly through my jobs to be able to travel all over the world. And one of my favorite areas of the world, two favorite areas of the world, are Tuscany and Provence. And Andalusia reminds me of those regions a lot. I mean, it's a very similar, beautiful rolling hills, wine, olive oil. It's a very, very similar kind of a look and climate as well, and whatnot. I would say just keep an open mind in terms of urban versus small town,
Mm-hmm.
because there is something really special about living in a small town where you have the accessibility of a place like Granada or the other amenities that you may need, like an airport, etc. So I would keep an open mind. I would also make a list. Like, what do you really think is going to make you happy?
Yeah, I do that Excel thing.
It,
So I just take
yeah.
an Excel spreadsheet and I say, okay, these are
Hmm.
my wants or needs, or versus
Hmm.
where I
Hmm.
am and what is offered in that location.
Yeah, I mean, just the practical, like you said, Excel spreadsheet, what's going to make you happy. And again, just kind of keeping an open mind. You've got to be open to learning a different culture,
Of
and
course.
you got to be looking at it as an adventure, not as a some
Right. It's
terrible
not a
chore.
task. It's not a task. It's
Yeah,
an adventure, and it's a
exactly.
new chapter in life.
Yeah,
That's how I
exactly.
think of it.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Andalusia is a great region. Politically, Spain is incredibly progressive. We have an incredible president who is super, super intelligent, competent. 11 of his cabinet members are women, and 11 out of 15. So we're talking about most cabinet members in the government are women. It's just a very progressive country. And so that's really important to me.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to actually get there next year. I know it seems like it's going to take forever, but
Oh, it'll be here before you know
yeah,
it. Oh
time
yeah.
does go quickly, and then once I'm
Yeah,
there, then even time will go quicker, and then you never know where I'll end up. So it's all exciting. It's all an adventure.
that's great.
Really.
Well, and I think you've really, with this website and this Facebook group, you've really tapped into a very important area of our community that really, I think, never got the attention that it should have, and so you should feel really good about really filling that gap for the community, and thinking about things like retirement that I think some people don't really think a lot about
Right.
until they get there.
Yeah. So speaking about the website, you can go onto my website. It's www.wheredogaysretire.com. There's a little coffee cup at the bottom of the screen, on every screen. It's
Hmm.
called Buy Me a Coffee, and every coffee costs $5, and that's to keep this podcast going, keep the website going, keep all of the software and hardware glitches out of the way that I deal with. Any donation is greatly appreciated.
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm very happy to do that. Yes, I
Oh,
will.
thank you. I was mostly
Absolutely.
talking about to the audience, not you in general, but thank you. But
Okay.
thank you anyway. But yeah, Kevin, before wrapping up again, is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners?
Again, just to not sound like a broken record, but just really keep an open mind. Look at look at retirement as a beginning of something and not an end of something.
Very good.
If you do decide to retire outside of the United States, I am a living proof that it's possible. It's not impossible, and it's actually enriching in terms of your life. And I think it gives you far more than I can articulate in words and whatnot. So just keep an open mind. Make lists of what's going to make you happy. If that list tends to tilt you towards something outside the United States, then I think a place like Spain is a very, very attractive option for a lot of people.
Okay.
Certainly a lot of people that I know.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being our guest on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Enjoy your trip to Italy, and we will talk soon. Take care.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Where Do Gays Retire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast and consider making a donation by clicking the coffee cup on any page at www.wheredogaysretire.com. Each cup of coffee that you buy costs $5 and goes towards helping us continue the podcast. Thank you for your continued support.